we're going to start. And why is it asking me to admit everyone that I've seen? It seems like it wants me to readmit people. All right. So thank you all for showing up, and I am going to launch the meeting by saying I'm Gary Gillette, head of the Southern Michigan chapter. Joe Shaw and I came up with this idea. We're hoping it works because it'll be a lot of fun if we can redo this during the season and at the end of the season. And I'm going to turn this over to Scott Carter, who, as I understand, is plotting to become king. And he is going to give us a speech on what will happen when he's in charge.
Oh, Gary, you're too funny. Well, I like the way that you put it earlier, was to give everybody a pep talk. And I think this was a great idea for us with the SABR national staff, because everybody that we want to talk to about getting to convention this summer is on this call, right? You're all drivable to Chicago. So that's really just wanted to take a couple minutes from the SABR national staff to say thanks for putting together such a great event, but then also encourage everybody to check out registration for our annual convention in Chicago, July 5th through 9th. If you haven't signed up already, we encourage you to do so. Early bird registration will end at the end of April, so you've got a few weeks to make sure that you get your discount on early bird registration. We'll be back at the Palmer House in Chicago. Now, that was last time we were at the Palmer House was before my time with SABR, but I've heard nothing but fantastic things about the hotel and the location. So really just wanted to make sure that, since this is an AL Central group and you're all within striking distance of Chicago, we highly encourage you to make the trek out to see us and to hang out with everybody there. Baltimore was a lot of fun, but we're really looking forward to Chicago this summer. And the success of the event will largely be determined by how many folks we can get, from the local and regional areas to get to Chicago. So let me know if you have any questions whatsoever. I'm always available via email or a call if you need help registering, if you need help talking to your particular chapters in a one-off setting. We're happy to do so, but we just wanted to make sure that everybody is checking out registration for SABR 51. Highly encourage you to be there and have a great event tonight. Thanks for having me.
I will say, for people who haven't been to the Palmer House, it's one of the great hotels in the country, and the location is fabulous. And about the only thing that isn't perfect is that we can't get to both a Cubs and a Sox game.
We will be heading to the Sox, but like you said, the Cubs are out of town during convention, but we will definitely get to a Sox game. So a lot of fun. We look forward to having hopefully a ton of you there.
Okay. Anybody have any questions for Scott before we 86 them?
My reign has been short-lived.
It was great while it lasted.
No, seriously. Anyone have any questions for Scott before we start the regular program? Okay. If not, I'm going to turn it over to Joe, because I'm busy admitting people here and trying to keep make sure everyone gets in. Joe Shaw, head of the Cleveland chapter. He is partly responsible for this idea. He and I sort of brainstormed it, and I'm going to let him take it over.
Okay,
I
wish
I were a Guardians fan and not a Tigers fan, I'll tell you.
Now, come on now. It's a long season, someone once said. Well, again, welcome everybody. My name is Joe Shaw, and current president of the Jack Graney Chapter in Cleveland. I do want to give Gary a lot of credit. Yeah, we did some brainstorming early on. I think we both desire to do some more chapter to chapter activities. Tonight, hopefully, will be a first successful step, but I really applaud Gary for his leadership here. In the spirit of getting someone who would love to speak about the Guardians, but has guaranteed me he will be short and precise and to the point, I'd like to introduce Vince Guerrieri. Vince is a noted, I mean this sincerely, writer in our area, but in his spare time, he's also secretary of the Jack Graney Chapter. So Vince, I will turn to do some Guardian speak.
Great, thanks, Joe. Boy, what a difference a year makes. For most of us here in Northeast Ohio, this time last year, we were kind of fretting about another slog through the season. Jose Ramirez was legitimately being tossed around as potential trade bait. They hadn't spent any money in the off season, and they said, well, we got a bunch of guys that we don't know anything about. As it turns out, we learned a lot about those guys. The Guardians started a total of 17 rookies last year, called them up. That was the first time, the most in a century, literally. Ended up benefiting from some good performances by them. Ended up locking up Jose Ramirez to a long-term deal and went 92-70 to win the American League Central Division. And what's really interesting is 92-70, that it's split evenly on the home and road side. They went 46-35 at home, 46-35 on the road. Beat the Rays in a 2-game wild card series. Took the Yankees to the full 5, but lost in the division series. And actually, everybody is kind of optimistic about this season. We saw a great game from Zunino today. One of the Indians or Guardians. I'm still not fully used to the name change, so please bear with me. One of the Guardians' big signings in the offseason. The other was Josh Bell, who was everybody hopes will add the power that the Guardians lineup was lacking last year. Obviously, the rule changes are going to affect everybody, and we saw James Karinchak kind of wig out with the pitch clock, but I think that there are a lot of people who think that the rule changes are going to be a net positive for the team, because last year they did emphasize a lot of situational hitting and stolen bases, and obviously the bases are larger this year. And Jose Ramirez was one of the most shifted players last year. And it is, and so, you know, hopefully we'll see more production from him, given that everybody's got to stay where they're supposed to stay now. So that is my time, and thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Okay. Vince, thanks very much for that summary. As I said in the chat, I still say Indians too much, so I'm glad to hear somebody in Cleveland say that. So we're now going to open it up for 10 minutes of freewheeling discussion about the Guardians. Of course, you're free to comment on your own team or another team. It's not like it has to be 100% Guardians, but this should be the Guardians moment, and then we'll move on to the White Sox. So,
well, the difference is, I mean, there are people who say Indians because it's inadvertent, and there are people who say Indians still as an act of defiance.
right, good point. I'm not being defiant. I'm just forgetful.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Okay, so
There's a Richard Smiley's out there.
Yes. Hi. And so Vince, this is the thing about the Guardians that I'm wondering about. As you said, they started 17 rookies, and just from my lifetime of watching teams with young kids, you know, some of them suffer what's called the sophomore slump. And what I'm wondering, has there been any discussion or thought about, like, you know, are you anticipating any of these guys, like, well, we think this guy may, you know, it may take a little more adjustment, or is there any discussion like that going on, or is it just all positive?
Well, I feel like that's kind of the elephant in the room is the idea that, you know, yeah, we had a lot of young players who were very, you know, who played very well. And actually, the best of them is Stephen Kwan. And I actually got to talk to him a couple of times for Cleveland Magazine, and he just had a monstrous April and then kind of fell to earth in May and really was able to regroup. So, you know, there definitely is some concern about regression, but, you know, I'm not sure how many people want to speak that into existence, so to speak, at this point. I mean, I think nobody wants to think about it unless it looks like it's absolutely happening. And well, 4 games in, it does not look like it's happening.
But Vince, this is Cleveland. We always have that thought in the back of our minds, right? Like you said.
Juana's one of the Oregon State guys, right? We've got Larnock in Minnesota, of course, Richmond. I was thinking there were 4 of those Oregon State players from the championship team that were in the majors, or maybe there's another one close, but Quan is one of those guys, right?
He is.
Yes, he is.
Vince, Bruce Allardyce here from Chicago. Cleveland did marvelously with its farm system call-ups last year. Are there any further talent in the pipeline that's going to make a difference this year for the Cleveland?
You know, and it's funny you bring that up because there is, and you know, we were talking earlier about, you know, being a Tigers fan, and I can still remember when the Tigers were the class of the American League, and the Indians were scuffling because, frankly, they didn't spend money on free agency, and the draft cupboard was bare. They made a lot of bad draft picks in the early aughts. They have really come around and restocked well over the last 10 years or so. I would say really starting with Jason Kipnis I think that was 2009 that they drafted him. But there is a lot of talent, and quite honestly, it feels like it is all in the middle infield, which led the the Guardians extended Jimenez that just came out last week. So, you know, there's a lot of middle infielders in there, and we're kind of wondering, you know, where we're gonna put everybody, because like I said, there's a shift now, so you can only put everybody where they're supposed to be. But so, you know, you can't help but wonder if any of them are going to be trade bait coming up this summer.
Do any of the attending viewers tonight actually attend regularly the Cleveland games?
Well, obviously, I mean, I try to get there as regularly as I can. I'm good for about a game or two a month. Unfortunately, it's a matter of time. But
How about anybody else out there from Cleveland?
Well, my wife and I are season ticket holders. We lead a group of about 10, and we've gone anywhere from 12 to 18 games per season.
Nice.
I went to 33.
Okay.
That might be the record.
Yeah, I would say that's pretty darn good.
Well, in the mid 60s, my high was 60. I went in 2 years in a row. That was the most.
I bet you didn't have trouble getting good seats.
they would actually say that before. I mean, I can remember being a kid in the 80s and watching them on television, and the announcers would always say, plenty of good seats still available.
Yeah. In the second inning, right?
One of the things I find fascinating about the old days, before most people bought their tickets in advance, is that Ernie Harwell would be on the game, and the game would be going on. You know, in the first inning, you'd say, weather's great, you know, why don't you come by the old ballpark? You know, like people might drop in the third inning. And of course, I don't think he expected most people to do that, but the idea that people just bought their tickets based on the weather and the pitching matchup, and that as opposed to planning a month or 2 or 3 or 6 in advance to go, is just completely different now.
They used to offer a businessman special on the getaway day games. They'd say lunch and 3 innings at the ballpark. But yeah, you know, of course, in the 90s, the Indians sold out like well in advance, so you had to make those plans months in advance when you wanted to go to a ball game. Now, obviously, you don't have to, and I still enjoy doing that once in a while.
You know, Vince, I would say that I believe, it's my opinion, I believe that the Guardians management is growing increasingly frustrated with the answer to that very question. What can we do to get more people in the seats for games? And as season ticket holders, we are getting just I would call it a flurry of surveys asking all sorts of what I call minutia questions about what would make your baseball game day experience better, that would encourage you to come to more games. And at our winter meeting, we had Bob DiBiasio, the Indian Senior Vice President for media and outreach and so forth. And my personal feeling is you could sense in talking with him and listening to him, there's just a frustration that they think they've tried just about everything and they're not sure what else to do.
Yeah, that's, I mean, that's obviously been an ongoing issue. Up until about a couple of years ago, the Indians were always one of the best rated teams in terms of TV viewership. Unfortunately, all the stuff with Bally has kind of seen TV viewing drop off a cliff. I have cable, but I know that there are a lot of people who have gotten the Bally app who said it is just an awful experience. I mean, it'll cut out, you can't get into games, anything like that. But you know, the attendance has never been, the 90s was lightning in a bottle, and it has never equaled that. And I think that's true for a variety of reasons. You know, part of it is situational, part of it is the environment around it, you know.
How much is some of the new ownership that has been brought in to, you know, help out the Dolans, I guess, for now? How much is that making a difference in terms of Cleveland?
I'm not sure, because they actually just brought them in. They had, God, I can't think of the guy's name off the top of my head, who bought in as a minority owner and then bought the Royals. But now they got Butcher, who is the new minority owner. And it sounds like there's an option for him to become a majority owner within the next, I think it was 5 years or so.
5 years, yeah.
But thus far, I'm not sure that it has made a whole lot of difference.
I think one of the things that they have said, the Indians front office, is it will not represent a major sea state change in the amount of money the franchise will spend for free agents. So that there's some hope from at least some of the fan base, new owner, new checkbook, bigger spending amount.
When the Jacobs bought the team, they sold a certain amount of shares, maybe 5% to the public. I actually bought a few shares, and that might be a way of trying to broaden the fan base a little bit, although teams are difficult. That's a difficult thing, because then if you need to ask the owner for more money, it's not easy to do that when it's listed on the stock exchange.
Well, and that's, you know, one of the things Major League Baseball in particular, they do a lot of, John Sherman was the Royals owner.
Yeah.
Somebody, Sally pointed that out in the chat. Thank you. But the problem with that is I'm not sure what they would be allowed to do in this day and age, because the Jacobs did that in the 90s. Actually, Nick Milletti, when he bought the Indians in the 70s, wanted to fund. Nick Milletti did a lot of stuff with other people's money, and he wanted to fund it with a stock exchange and or with a stock offering, and he was forbidden from doing so. So I'm not sure that the Guardians or any other team would be allowed to do any kind of stock offering. And I'm told that that will minute.
You can buy stock in the Atlanta Braves. It's on the stock exchange.
Yeah, but I think Major League Baseball really discourages teams from doing that now.
The books get open.
Past. Say again?
The books get open, do they not, when it's a publicly traded organization?
Yeah, except I think the Braves have managed to arrange their corporate structure so they don't reveal too much.
Right.
Okay.
I haven't followed it. I did, as I mentioned,
point.
I was an Indian shareholder, and I really liked that. I would, you know, I mean, I liked the Indians and admired them, so it wasn't like it was a random team. But you know, I suppose I would buy shares in the Marlins if they're on the market, just to be, you know, just to be an owner. Okay, well, we're going to switch now to the White Sox for a discussion of the White Sox. Rich Hansen, you want to set things up? Rich is here still, right?
this is Richard Smiley. I think I'm the one speaking. I
Oh,
don't,
right.
yeah, I don't, you know, I don't think it'll be, I don't know if Rich is actually on the call. I didn't see.
I saw him earlier, but go ahead. I was
Yeah,
letting, so.
okay. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, thanks for inviting us. It's it's no coincidence that Cleveland is the city that would have the most interest in talking about this year. And I think Joe promised us that if we agreed to do this, that he promised that the Sox would win more games than Cleveland.
Yes, promise them anything.
Always good to promise things you can't deliver.
Right.
But Richard Smiley volunteered to do this part of it. He's known for putting out his fearless forecast every year. That's always very interesting. So take it away, Rich.
Yeah, hi. So I'll try to be brief and quick, but just I wanted to, as a way of introducing where White Sox fans are coming from, I wanted to give just a little quick background. Okay, yeah, you can hear me. Little quick background that in 2016, the Cubs won the World Series. And I don't think it was a coincidence that fall,
Yes, we know.
White Sox management finally decided to blow it up. So they blew up their team, made a lot of trades and said, okay, we're going to go the Cubs route and we're going to suck for a few years and then we're going to try to rebuild it. And so because the Cubs had been successful, I think White Sox fans tolerated it and went along with this. And by 2019, it was very apparent that there was a lot of talent in the farm system and there was even some talent in the majors. So when the COVID year came in 2020 and all these players were up at once and they started acquiring free agents like Dallas Keuchel and Yasmani Grandal, people were excited and they thought, wow, this is going to be our time. And in the COVID year, the White Sox were the first team to clinch a playoff spot. Here, 2021 comes along, the team does even better, wins the division despite some injuries, and people were really pumped up for last year. And as you know, for us, last year was quite numbing. I mean, maybe it would have been one thing if they were actually bad, but they weren't bad either. They were the epitome of a 500 team, no better, no worse. They couldn't decide what they were, so they just fell into this mediocrity. And part of that was certainly due to the amount of injuries. Now, of course, every team has to deal with injuries, but you're talking out of our core, I would say out of the core, the main core of the team last year, or the design core, was supposed to be, Jose Abreu, Tim Anderson, Yohan Moncada, Eloy Jimenez, Louis Robert, and Yasmani Grandal. Out of those players, the only player to play in more than 60% of the games was Jose Abreu, and he, despite numerous bumps and bruises and injuries, played in almost all of them, whereas the rest of them were just constantly out, and to the point that it became a running joke that if a player ran the first base, you'd be worried he'd be getting injured for running. So there was almost no accountability either in terms of effort, and that just made the team, for a lot of reasons, very unlikable last year. So people felt that the talent was there, but not the effort and not the depth and not the willingness by management to, improve on the depth. So some changes were made in the offseason. Of course, Tony La Russa is finally gone, which was a bone of contention for a lot of White Sox fans. He's gone, replaced by a guy who I think people are just hoping, Pedro Caval, sharp guy who, can just at least manage normally. Nothing out of the extreme, just give us a normal effort there. And although, yes, Jose was our best performer and played in most of the games, it became very obvious that we needed to move him off first base so we could get Andrew Vaughn the hell out of right field and actually get outfielders in the outfield. So by attrition, the defense actually should improve a little this year. It's not going to be great or anything, but it's not going to be as good as Cleveland's defense, but it's like, it should be at least decent compared to horrible. And the one other thing before we open it up is I just wanted to mention that in the context of all this, the White Sox, what hasn't been talked about much in the Chicago press is that they're really at a crossroads, that actually there's a lot of players, like, for example, at the end of this year, Lucas Giolito is a free agent. Yasmani Grandal is a free agent. Roberto Lopez is a free agent. Elvis Andrus is a free agent. And then they have team options on another 6 or 7 players. I mean, they'll probably keep them, but I mean, it's like there's a lot of fluidity. And if the team gets off to a really bad start and come June, it doesn't look like they're going to compete, it wouldn't be stunning to see midway through the season some players being traded off or sold off. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's just, I haven't seen much discussion of that as a possibility. But yet you look at the contract status, there's quite a few contracts that are either up this year or dependent on team options. And then a lot of the contracts are up after 2024. So if this team, it looks promising right now. The players were playing well over the weekend. The guy, Moncada's the best he's looked in 3 years. But, if this doesn't pan out, if we start getting another lot of injuries and stuff like that, I think you could see some changes midseason with this team. Okay, that's it. Go ahead, folks.
That was a good preview. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Richard. That was really helpful. There's stuff that I learned about the Sox. So anyone have any questions for Rich or just comments?
Sure. We
Comments.
talked about how La Russa's managerial stint in Chicago was a bone of contention. How on the outside looking in, I feel like everybody thought that this was just a terrible, terrible idea. Was there a lot of defense of it in Chicago?
No, I think, and in fact, probably before it was heard nationally, the rumors were appearing here. And when the rumors first started coming, I think a lot of people thought that it was just, like somebody playing a joke. Like, no, yeah, that like, you can't really bring this guy back. And it's funny because it's almost like the flaws you expected he'd have weren't really the flaws that he had. It was almost like you're expecting, okay, this old school disciplinarian. And part of the problem maybe was overcompensation, where it almost went the other means where, players would just like, get away with not putting out full effort to the point halfway through the season, they were like worried about him getting injury. So they were like telling players not to run out ground balls to first base, stuff like that. And just, it was almost contrary. It was the reverse of where I think people felt, hey, you need somebody to hold them accountable, which you kind of thought you thought you'd get that. You thought there'd be other problems with La Russa. And it turned out that may have been the biggest problem, just that he was too easy on them instead of saying, hey, it was a professional team. You don't screw around like that. And it just didn't lead to a good environment. I'm not one who blames the problems on him as much as I think other people do. I don't believe like, oh, La Russa cost us 10 or 20. I don't believe that, but it didn't help. That's all I'll say.
Rich, that's an interesting point you make about him overcompensating discipline-wise. I saw a similar thing with Jim Leland in Detroit. When he came in 2006, he was like, you didn't do something. He was poking his finger in your chest, telling you right to your face what you were going to do and what was going to happen if you didn't do it. And then 5-6 years later, I watched him make excuses for inexcusable stuff, particularly about the big dogs like Cabrera, but also about others, where he was more a Tommy Lasorda manager, covering up for the players instead of, telling them off. And I thought that change in his attitude and public posture toward the players was really remarkable.
Mhm. Yeah.
To me, it almost seemed like he lost interest over time. At least that's the impression I got.
Leland?
Oh, no, I'm sorry, Tony La Russa.
Oh, La Russa, yeah.
La Russa
Oh,
was
great.
La Russa was also dealing with health issues last year.
That's true.
No,
Well,
I mean, he had to step aside for a while, legitimately for health reasons. So,
well, we can all pile on Tony La Russa. It's probably a bad choice, but the
Yeah.
fundamentals are really the farm system. The trades that they did with their veterans in 2016 brought in young talent from other organizations. But the draft choicing and the draft talent, the second, third, fourth, fifth round choices just aren't making it for the White Sox. The team they got this year, not one of the 5 new players is a Sox draftee. And maybe you can excuse that if the Sox won 95 games last year. You know, if you have a pat hand, maybe you shouldn't be bringing up all these guys. But when you have a arguably mediocre team and your farm system can't even get a replacement for the mediocre talent that you got, what does that say about the farm system?
Or the organization in general.
Yeah, there's a distinct lack of development. I mean, basically, the Sox, if it's not a first-round draft choice, they go nowhere, and you just can't do that in the major leagues. Cleveland obviously is getting a lot of mileage out of second, third, sixth-round draft choices. Sox get nothing out of that. The defense we talked about last year that was mediocre. Well, it was horrible. Players, when the regulars were healthy, it was actually an average defense.
Yeah.
But they couldn't even bring up people who had average defense, let alone, hit 270 or 280 or something like that.
Not to, like you say, Richard, not to blame La Russa on it, but John Buckeye brought up when Mercedes hit the 3-0 home run off position player, and then when he got plunked, that he seemed to be this unwritten rule, play the game the right way. And they have players like Anderson and some of the others who I love watching Anderson and guys like Lindor and Tatis, too bad what he did, but defecate, as they say, on the unwritten rules. I don't know, did he crack down at all that way on you got to play the game the right way, can't show emotion, that sort of stuff?
Not too much. I think that was, to be honest, I think we were expecting a lot more of that. And that was very egregious with Yerman Mercedes, what he did there. But that was really the only thing like that. I mean, most people, if they think about La Russa's bad stuff, tend to think about the intentional walks on 1 and 2 pitches, stuff like that. Just stuff that was just mind-boggling in terms of strategy, more than that was like the one specific, play the game the right way, but then it really didn't creep up anywhere else. The discussion of the farm system, I think, is good because, I think they're starting to get better at that. But I mean, for a long time, there was a situation where really the Sox couldn't develop position players at all, but they were excellent at developing pitchers. And what Bruce was talking about, there were drafts, you go back and yes, they would draft pitchers with their top 10 rounds, and a lot of them would be decent and make the majors. That they had a scouting director and they had a system that was really good at identifying pitchers, but they couldn't identify position players. And then gradually they decided, well, we want to start trying to get position players in. So they moved that guy out, and it's been a process since then of who's doing the drafting. And I think they've had some success with identifying some players in recent years. And it seems like, last year, the system took a step forward from where they were last year with some surprises in terms of the guys they've been signing, Brian Ramos and Colin.
Richard, where did the White Sox get Dylan Cease from?
He was one of the trades. They got him from the Cubs. He was in the Cubs system. They got him for Jose Quintana. That was
pretty good the other day.
Yeah, he's good. Yeah, he's a good pitcher. I mean, still, like Bruce was saying, I mean, most of the good players they have, they got Eloy Jimenez and Dylan Cease in the same trade for Jose Quintana. They got Yohan Moncada for Chris Sale, as well as Michael Kopech, who's their pitcher, for Chris Sale. They got, like a lot of it, Louis Robert, they signed themselves. That's their own, that was international signing. And
Giolito,
they got in the trade with the Nationals for Adam Eaton. They got Giolito and two other pitchers. I forget who. I think they Roberto Lopez, who's in the bullpen now, and one other pitcher who didn't pan out. And then I'm trying to think, Tim Anderson was their own draft choice. So I mean, there are some players that are like, and this year they've got their own international signing, Oscar Colas, who's starting in right field. So
who will close instead of Hendricks now, you think?
Well, right now they're trying Roberto Lopez, and he's been shaky 2 times out. He's never done it before. So, I think, they're going to give him a chance. They still want to see the mentality. Plus, one thing that was noticed is when push came to shove, on opening day, the White Sox had an option to move Liam Hendricks to the 60-day injured list, and they opted not to. And the only reason you opt not to is you think he'll be back before then. So there's unspoken optimism that you may see Hendricks back this year, and maybe even much earlier than expected. But that's all we can say about that.
I'm going to interrupt here because I want to move on to the Twins. I don't want anyone to get cheated of their time, but really good summaries and answers, Richard. I just want to say that intentional walk thing really baffled me. All I could figure out is this is Tony La Russa saying, I'm a Hall of Famer. Who the hell are you? I can do whatever I want. I'm a Hall of Famer and nothing you say matters, because it was so stupid.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, so we're going to move on to the Twins here, and Gene Gomes is going to introduce the Minnesota segment.
Hey, hello guys. I really like this this involvement of the 5 chapters. That was really fun. So we promoted it and we pumped it up in Minnesota, and we have a pretty good contingent, I think, of followers on the Zoom tonight. And I wanted to introduce John Bonus, who is a longtime media coverer of the follower of the Twins and the Twin Cities. And I'll let John take over with his preview of the Twins.
Thank you, Gene. The Twins finished last year 78 with only 78 wins, 6 games under 500. But that really doesn't tell what happened last year. Last year, that team was in first place by 5 games at Memorial Day. And even up to September 3rd, September 4th, they were tied for first place. But injuries absolutely decimated that team by the time September happened. The lineups they were playing by the end of there were they're basically the St. Paul Saints at that point, and they ended up going 10 games under 500 over the last 3.5-4 week stretch. So they ended up a 78 win team. They tried to address some of that stuff. I'm sorry, can you hear me okay? Okay.
Yeah.
They tried to address some of that stuff with a pretty active offseason. Primarily around, people were amazed that they went and tried to sign Carlos Correa. It was even more amazing that they ended up signing Carlos Correa. Lots of twists and turns, lots of drama around that. Never saw it coming. But ultimately, he was on the team last year, and that 78 win total from last year, Vegas has them at an 84.5 win pace this year in the latest. So what changed? Well, they also added Christian Vasquez as a catcher, probably the second best catcher on the market, to help shore up their catching situation a little bit. Bump Greg Jeffers to basically the backup position. They also went and traded away Luis Arraez, the American League batting champion, for Pablo Lopez, which caused all kinds of eyebrow raising, I guess. And then they went and signed Joey Gallo as well, who today, by the way, hit 2 home runs and a double in his 3rd game with the Twins. And then the other thing they did is to address sort of the injury issues that they had all last year. They just had a lot of veteran depth. They traded for Kyle Farmer, who was basically the Cincinnati Reds starting shortstop last year, to be basically their backup shortstop. They traded for Michael Taylor from the Royals, who was basically their starting center fielder last year, to be their backup center fielder. And they signed early in spring training Donovan Solano, who had played a lot of almost a starting role for the Reds at first base and DH last year, to also come off the bench. And already they have needed that depth because the injuries problems have not gone away. They started the season, spring training, hoping that they would see 3 big bats return to their lineup. Jorge Polanco missed September. Byron Buxton missed September. Alex Kirilloff missed several months of the season last year, 4 or 5 months, 4 months of the season last year. At the beginning of spring training, they anticipated all 3 being healthy by opening day. By opening day, 2 of them are on the injured list, and one of them is a DH only. That's Byron Buxton. So they're already leaning into some of that veteran depth that they have. But I think the big reason that they're looking better this year than in previous years is the rotation. Last year at this time, when they were trying to find an opening day starter, their opening day starter was Joe Ryan, who'd had about 6 or 8 starts in the majors at that point as a rookie. And he was basically this opening day starter by default. Sonny Gray wasn't ready because of the shortened season. They'd signed Dylan Bundy and Chris Archer. They traded for Chris Paddock the night before opening day. And then Bailey Ober was the only other option. So Joe Ryan was the opening day starter last year. This year, they've got 4 veterans who have more experience than Joe Ryan. They've got the opening day starter was Pablo Lopez, who they got from Luis Arraez. They traded for, they also traded for Tyler Mahle in the middle of last season. Sonny Gray has had a full spring training to work, and Kenta Maeda returned from Tommy John surgery. So much so that Bailey Ober, who's sitting out there with a 3.8 ERA over 31 starts in his young career so far, has bumped back to be the starting pitcher of the St. Paul Saints this year. He's the #1 starter down there. And then finally, they addressed a lot of their bullpen. They've got a much more solid bullpen than they had last year. Last year, they ended up relying way too much on Emilio Pagan, which I'm sure the Cleveland Guardians really appreciated. But this year, Emilio Pagan just made his first appearance with a 4-run lead in the bottom of the 9th, because he's going to be the 7th guy out of the bullpen. That, I think, about covers it.
Well, thank you. That's a great summary. And let's see some hands or see some questions. Roger, I don't see you're muted, but I don't hear anything.
Oh, Gene, what are the projections for Minnesota this year by the usual projection services?
My understanding of the usual projection services have them about anywhere from about 82 to 86 wins. Like I said, Vegas has had them at 84.5, but interestingly, Vegas had them at about 81.5 wins when spring training started, and nothing changed except we had a couple guys who we thought were going to get healthy not get healthy. So why did the number move up 3 wins over the length of spring training when they really didn't add anybody? In fact, kind of subtracted some people. I think it's just people started looking around at those teams and seeing what they had there, and still started betting on the over, and Vegas had to move their line.
Well, I think they saw the White Sox play in spring training, and so they figured Minnesota would win 3 more games.
Well, I will mention that the White Sox slide also moved down during that time, or the odds moved during time. That the Twins, the money that was bet on the Twins was coming out of the White Sox pool, it seemingly.
Just from that preview, John, it seems, just my impression is that the Twins will probably, surpass what you said. 82 was the kind of the projection. It seems like they should surpass that if things, not even if everything goes well, but just if most of the things they do that goes well, they should have a winning season.
Well, I mean, I'd like to think so. The they were in a position to have that kind of a season last year, and injuries decimated them. But injuries have been decimating them for year after year after year. And at some point, you start taking a look at that and going, maybe you just keep attracting guys who get injured. Byron Buxton is an all-world player. But Byron Buxton plays 90 games a season. This year, the plan, part of the reason for having a DH is probably because he's still rehabbing the knees that he had surgery on in October. But I think part of it is also they just don't want to have him spend a lot of time in center field early on in the hopes that they figure out some way to keep him healthy in August and September next year. And there's a lot of players like that. Tyler Malley had a shoulder injury last year, but they're rolling with him. Kenta Maeda is coming off a Tommy John surgery. Alex Kirilloff, we still don't know what's going on with his wrist. And he had such a bright future 2 years ago, and we're not really sure where it's at. Jorge Polanco has had ankle injuries for 3 years, and now he's got knee injuries. This knee injury wasn't even something that had surgery on, and it's still not fixed from September. So at some point, you got to start wondering, maybe injuries are just part of what you signed up, or maybe it's a market inefficiency that you keep leaning into, and you're not learning. I will say this: they have a really strong group at AAA this year. Of the top 11 Twins players, 11 Twins prospects, I'd say 6 or 7 of them can probably be expected to make it to the major leagues this year. So they have a lot of backups for that. For instance, if Jorge Polanco doesn't come back from his knee injury, they've got a guy now there named Edouard Julien who hit over 500 for Canada in the WBC, and he's going to be starting in St. Paul this year at second base. He looks like a legit phenom. So there's a lot of there's a lot of insurance on top of insurance on top of insurance after last year's September debacle.
John, your comment about the Arise trade indicated you have some either doubts about it or don't think the full story has been told. You want to elaborate on that?
Well, I don't have any doubts. It's not that the full story hasn't been told. I just loved Luis Arise. Everybody loved Luis Arise, right? He was truly a unique player and also a really good fit for this lineup. This team has, I think, started Max Kepler in the leadoff spot for the last 3 games, and Max Kepler is not a leadoff hitter. Luis Arise was a leadoff hitter. He was a great leadoff hitter. He was a great person at the top of the lineup. The Twins really had 4 guys you could count on in the lineup last year: Correa, Buxton, Polanco, and Arise. Well, we still got Correa. Buxton now is there, but he's DHing. Polanco's hurt, and Arise they traded away. So that's part of where the question becomes: is where does this team find the offense? And I think what they're planning on is they're planning on leaning into their numbers 5 through 9 because they don't have as much faith or as much peak in sort of their 1 through 4. I think they're betting more that they have a high floor because they see that their ceiling is kind of lowered. Now, that said, I'm really excited about Pablo Lopez. So I think they got a really good player back in return. He's under control for 2 more years. But Luis Arise was an interesting and special player, and I think a lot of fans were real concerned about that trade.
Yeah, he got
The
4
shift
he got 4 hits
restrictions. Have they been? Kansas City played outfielder and short right on Gallo. Were they doing that on Kepler as well? And just curious.
Not during spring training, they weren't. I only saw it a couple times on Gallo, truth be told, in spring training. They weren't doing it. Kansas City wasn't doing it against Kepler, and there's a good reason for that. Kepler does hit the ball in the air to left field. Gallo doesn't.
What was your opinion of the air 9 on the Gallo's first at bat on Thursday? Did you see that?
Yes, I did see it. Yeah. So the air 9 meeting, what happened on that play, folks, is that Gallo hit a ground ball through the right side of the infield, but the Kansas City was playing him with their right fielder, where the second place baseman used to play during the shift. So way in, way deep. And a ground ball had been hit to him, and he could throw it to first base. I thought it was a legit error, Stu.
Okay, I do too. It may get changed. There's a lot of flap on it just because it's been since 1904 since there was an E9 in that case. But it's how many times has a right fielder been positioned? We'll get guidance with the review committee on what they do with that play. But I agreed. If you're going to play the guy there, you expect him to field a grounder.
Right, exactly. He's there to get the grounder. He's not there to catch a fly ball.
Right.
John, I as an outsider, I just must say, when the Twins made the trade for Lopez, I thought he was going to be in a terrific addition, exactly what the team needed. It was at that point that I made them my choice to win the division. As much as losing Arias hurts, I felt that, you do have a good farm system that can still produce hitters in that, but that pitching's always been, when the Twins win the division, it's because they get some pitching. And, period.
And they're real excited about their pitching this year. They're really excited about Lopez. I think, listen, when they had that press conference, Derek Foley made it abundantly clear. You've got to give something to get something. And they did not want to give up Luis Arias. I think that deal had been rumored for months.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the Twins were continually trying to find a way to not lose Luis Arias in that deal. But ultimately, that's what they give up. But for what it's worth, I kind of feel the same way. Lopez has been a pretty consistent number 2 starter who looks like he might be able to bump his way up into like number 1/ace territory. He seems to be kind of straddling that line right now. It'll be interesting to see if he takes that extra step this year. I think the Twins are real optimistic about it. It's not that usual that you hand your opening day start to somebody like him when you got Sonny Gray, who was, on your team all year last year, or Kenta Maeda, who was finished second in Cy Young Award, 3 years ago, or last year's opening day starter Joe Ryan on the roster, and they gave it to Lopez. I think it's in part because they recognize they might have something there.
He was great. I know he was great because I picked him up for my fantasy team.
Yeah, he was great in the first game too. Right, you're right.
I think Lopez is sky's the limit for him. I'm really impressed with him, and you guys may have a sneaky Cy Young candidate there.
Well, plus, Richard, the Twins received one or two other pretty good players in addition to Lopez to help swing the deal. John, I don't remember the names, but I remember hearing they were pretty highly regarded pitchers.
He was very highly regarded. I'm trying to remember too. He's definitely one of our top 20 prospects over at Twins Daily. So, he's like 19 years old. The Twins actually have a pretty interesting class of about 18, 19-year-old guys who could be coming through in about 3-4 years, on top of the kind of glut they have in the pipeline here at AAA right now.
Okay.
Well, thank you, John. This has all been really good, better than I expected. Not that I expected poor quality, but this has been terrific discussion. I'm learning tons of this stuff. Okay, I'm going to introduce Rogelio Castillo, who is going to talk about the Tigers. He's got a tough assignment given the opening season. But Rogelio, I'll let you introduce yourself and talk about all the places that you can be found. So, Tigers are up. You're muted, Rogelio.
There we go. Thank you. Sorry, I muted my other mic, so I apologize. Hi. First, to answer his, John, by the way, the prospect was Jose Salas and Brian Trulio. It was ironic too, because St. Paul, I just was watching the Mud Hens play St. Paul this weekend. So St. Paul's got some pretty good bats on their squad. It was interesting to see Aaron Sanchez still out there. At one point, geared up, and I say that in quotations, to 93 to get Parker Meadows, try to get him out. But yes, I'm Rogelio Castillo. You can find me at I run a site, Tigers ML Report, so it covers Tigers minor league. I also write for Motor City Bengals and Fansided, the national site for them, and Call to the Pen. And I have the fortunate, and I just this is my first year in the Baseball Writers Association, and I get the fortunate pleasure to, for the second straight season, cover the Detroit Tigers, which is, it's going to be a long season. And there's a lot of things to like, though, for the first time in a long time. And this is a system that has not developed positional player talent, probably a handful in the last 30 to 40 years. Unlike the Twins, where the Twins Twins have guys like Jose Miranda, who they just seem to always find a good niche with this. The Tigers have suffered greatly under Al Avila in the sense that they're now just developing talent past the 4th and 5th round. Derek Skubal is a first 9th round draft pick to start in a game for the Tigers and actually be effective since, I'm talking 1991, 1992 here, with Rusty Meacham and Scott Aldred as a prime example of that. And they still have ways to go. The depth that we thought was there is still not there. But they have a couple guys that are positional wise are really excited exciting. They're going to probably see at this point of the season. One being Parker Meadows, who had a fantastic spring. He was able to change his swing mechanics, and he's been able to tap into that left-handed power pretty well. He was, I think, second or third in the Grapefruit League in home runs. Another one to look out for is Andre Lipsius, and he was another Avila draft pick who's just worked his way up. And those are kind of represent the old guard. With Scott Harris, I think the biggest thing I've noticed so far, and it's been kind of talked about among the writers, is that he's not afraid to go through the waiver wire. But I think there's also this kind of almost mentality of smartest guy in the room, because the trade right now that came in question was he traded for a Cubs infielder who was batting under 100 in spring training because he's a left-handed stick. Meanwhile, they have Tyler Nevin, who's going to be coming up here shortly on a rehab assignment. So they seem to, I don't know, I think they're kind of trying to convince people that a little bit that, hey, we know what we're doing. So it's going to take some time, but this weekend start does not help. They're outscored 21-3 this weekend. Spencer Turkelson is all the hard hit contact data is only for one for 11. And even Hinch was kind of furious why he was questioned why Miguel Cabrera got a full game of at bats on Saturday. Saturday is one of the ugliest games I've seen in a long time too. But I couldn't explain to you the offense historically low speaking. It was so bad last year, and a lot of those the Willie Castros and all they found work elsewhere. So I'm not sure why the Tigers are so obsessed with finding light hitting infielders like they have been. But outside of that negativity, there is some prospects on the rise. And I personally, for once, for how long I've watched the system, is finally, even with the trade for Matt Verling and Nick Maton, I think the Tigers have done well with that, because Gregory Soto, his walks were too high and he wasn't a good closer to a certain extent. So, but yeah,
Okay.
that's where the Tigers are right now.
Thanks, Rogelio. So anyone have questions or brickbats to throw at the Tigers? Anyone pay attention to their opening series?
Paid attention to the scoreboard enough to know it wasn't good. But my question for Rogelio, you talked about the position players, but what intrigued me about the Tigers in the last 2 years was the pitching being accumulated. And I thought they'd take a step just because of that. I mean, 2 years ago in 2021, I really thought the team was up and coming because of that pitching. And what happened?
Richard, it's a good question. And I think that Chris Fetter and the developmental squad has done a really good job of developing pitching. They're able to get guys like Bo Brisky and Garrett Hill, who are 28th and 29th round draft picks. They're getting something out of it, which they weren't able to do before at all. Currently, right now, they fired the entire medical staff from last season because Casey Mize was out, Matt Manning was out, and they had all these injuries. And sure enough, it's kind of weird as hell that hey, Bo Brisky's suffering some shoulder issues now, but they've been, thanks to Chris Fetter and the development squad, they've been able to develop pitching a little better. They have a gentleman by the name of Wilmer Flores who is down in AA, who I think is going to be either a very good starter or a back end of a bullpen. He's developing a third pitch, but it's gotten significantly better than it was. This is a system, like I said, the Tigers couldn't even, one started to develop in the 90s was Justin Thompson. That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Mitch. Mitch reminded me that the Tigers had 17 different starting pitchers last season. Okay. And it's I feel like in some ways I have a vibe. No pitcher, by the way, on the current rotation has pitched over 100 innings in over 3 years. So I'm sorry, 2 years. So Matt Boyd coming back from injury. Yeah, this is going to be a long year.
So Rogelio, what's the prospects for Javi Baez this coming season?
Robert, I think he had a really good World Baseball Classic, and his overall in spring training, he was hitting the ball hard. I thought he did a really good job with his defense. Last year, a lot of people didn't know that he was suffering from an injured thumb, which affected his arm, or excuse me, his throwing motion and him at the plate. But Javi Baez, I think Tiger fans are still impatient on the fact that he's going to swing at bad pitches, but I think he's going to be a steady regular. I think he's going to be right around like just the power numbers going to be there. The strikeouts are still going to be there, but I think he's going to produce at a much better clip than he did last season.
Yeah. Are you ready for the Miguel Cabrera farewell tour?
As a fan, I'm like the fan side of me is very, very, very sad that he's retiring. But as the writer and as the person that watches this every day, I'm glad because the Tigers get to free up the money, and I can also finally hear silence from fans blaming why this team is not progressing forward, because every single time the Tigers are bad, oh, Cabrera's fat, contract, it's his contract's holding us back. No. Miguel Cabrera has yes, it's all muscle memory, but the team has been fundamentally bad across the board, and you just can't blame one guy. And I get so sick and tired of that all the time. And it's such a nuisance sometimes when fans blame him when this guy is doing this. And I like in dugout last year, hearing him talk about how bad his legs have been. And this is guy doing everything on just basic muscle memory at this point.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know the injuries, the real extent of the injuries he's had the last few years, because he doesn't want that to be a blame. And I appreciate that from a star player, but it's definitely, you can definitely see it. I mean, when the second he started turning into a singles hitter, that's why he's not able to use his legs the same way. And it's, at first it was really sad to watch, but then he had a year, either the beginning of last year or maybe the year before, where he was hitting close to 300 at the All-Star break, and it was all singles. And it was like not enough people appreciated how much skill that takes to do when you're, it's kind of the same thing as like when Frank Tanana, blew his arm out and he had to start pitching like a junker instead of, it's the hitter's equivalent to that. And it was so fantastic to watch, but it was, marred in a time where the team was, pretty rough around the edges the rest of the way. So it wasn't something, he wasn't driving in the run, so it wasn't really talked about. But okay, Rogelio, what do you think? Who's the All-Star pick? I picked Scuba would be the All-Star the next 5 years, and he's out. So who's the All-Star going to be this year? Because I have no idea.
If I have to take, I'm trying to discern myself from the last 3 days of watching that, whatever that was. I'm going to say, honestly, I have a good vibe about Jake Rogers. I think Jake Rogers if you watched his game today, the way he sequenced Joey Wentz today was fantastic. He was able to frame him correctly. He was able to call the right pitches. And I mean, that home run helped too, but he was hitting the ball really well in spring. His confidence is back, his arm's there. And I think if the Tigers are going to be desperate enough to put Eric Hosmer out in the outfield, and I think you're going to see Rogers more behind the plate, but I really like it, whether he close to an All-Star year or not, but I think he's going to be a 2 and above WAR player this year.
I like it. I like the pick.
How about Riley Green? Does he have a breakout year possibly? Riley Green?
I'm hoping so. There's some encouraging things. I still think he's pressing a little bit. There was kind of he did a really good job today outrun to break up the no-hitter. But Riley Green, I think with the new fences built in that they're fixing up now, I think that he's going to benefit the most. I think if he can just get out of it, I think right now it's a little bit between the ears a little bit with him right now, but there's a lot of potential there. And I think that his defensive game is what makes him, he's going to be known more for his glove first than his bat. I think the bat's going to come around this year. But it's going to, like I said, it just, their schedule's brutal. I mean, they had Tampa, now they got to go to Houston. They come home for the Red Sox, which is a sort of a reprieve for a little bit, but still, it's gonna be hard to see that kind of progress from Green for now.
No, I would say, wouldn't you say it's next year's the year? Like, I feel like this year's the year he's going to start figuring some things out. His defense is always going to be there, and I think that like it's going to be hedging toward a big year next year, at least hopefully.
Yeah, that's what I think too, Dan. I mean, I think that he's going to, I think, like I said, the bat is there. I've seen when I was down in Lakeland, it was my first spring training. It was nice to see the bat was definitely coming off the ball was coming off the bat different for him. And I felt like his swing too, like in terms of just, he even said, like, he was talking to us about how it was a little bit too much of in his own head. So I think that, to me, I think that stands out. I think he's going to show some improvement this year.
I think that Green is the player that is giving the Tigers hope, because Torkelson so far, and I'm not saying he'll never turn it around, but Torkelson so far has been such a crushing disappointment that Green's the potential that people see in Green is even more important.
Well, he could be the worst hitter in the league, but he's going to save you a lot of runs on defense, and he's electrifying to watch on defense. So at least you got that no matter what.
Right, but I don't think he won't be a bad hitter. I mean, the question is how good of a hitter he'll be. But no, it's absolutely, and it's critical in Detroit, even with the change in the outfield, to have a good center fielder. I remember watching Granderson play center field, and it was so exciting, and it was so important, just like in Tiger Stadium.
Right, and he took some time to get going offensively too. I feel like it's a kind of a similar situation.
Yeah, although Granderson was not a highly touted prospect.
Right.
Yeah, you forget too that Riley Green's only 21, 22. He's not. This is a guy that drafted out of high school, and at least he's not Derek Hill. In the sense that, like, Derek Hill, I remember all the hype they had about Derek Hill, and he could never amount to it. And that's one of those things where I think the Tigers, at least with this, because his dad's a hitting coach, you've seen the adjustments. Even when I saw him at West Michigan, he's completely, not only is he a bigger player, but he's also just in terms of even defensively out there. I think continues to constantly work on his game, and he took up golfing to get better at that. And so I think that Green's going to be fine. It's just what I worry about is Torkelson. Yes, the batted ball data is awesome. 100 miles an hour. Fantastic. But guess what? You're still hitting the ground. You're still not getting any air on it. And that's a bat you want. That's a bat that's supposed to get some airtime.
Okay, Rogelio, good job.
Thank you.
Looking forward to hearing more from you during the season. Are you going to be covering every game, including road trips?
I'm going to be doing a few road trips here and there, but I will be at every single home game starting on Thursday. So I'll be there. I'll be there pretty much as many road games as I can, just trying to continue to pick up some freelance work as well.
Okay. And Francis, I see your question in the chat. We'll get to that in the free-for-all at the end, but we need to move on to the Royals. Is Roger still with us? Oh yeah, there he is. Okay. Roger, you want to introduce the Royals segment?
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, I'm Roger Erickson, chapter president of the Monarchs Chapter for SABR, and glad to have this discussion. The main thing that I'm going to talk about is not the prospects of the Royals, because the key issue we had during the off season was a new stadium. Kauffman Stadium, or Royal Stadium as some people like to call it, turned 50 years this year. And John Sherman, our new owner, has seen what has happened in other cities and wants to build a downtown stadium. The problem is there are several locations that are vying for the site, and that the Royals stadium lease runs out in 2031. But there is an opt-out for possibly as early as 2027 if they can get a site finished in 4 years. The main sites that they are looking for are downtown, which would help commerce, because to those who have been around the Kauffman Stadium and Arrowhead Stadium, knows that there is not much commerce out in the area, and it's primarily convenient to get out to the ball games. As far as the team, we in the free agent signings, we picked up a lot of players that will be trade baits for contenders if they have a good first half of the season. Aroldis Chapman yesterday looked like he was back to the Aroldis Chapman of the Yankee fame with his high-speed pitches. We picked up Jordan Lyles. We picked up in the outfield Jackie Bradley Jr. We would have had a good team if it was 5 years ago, but the Royals do not have much of a farm system. With Witt and Melendez and Pasquantino, that is primarily the only prospects we've got out there. Most of the prospects are 2025 or 2024 or 2025. You still there?
Yeah, we're here. We can hear you. You're fine.
Okay. So it is another year of rebuilding with the new general manager for the Royals. And interest has waned in the city on the Royals, primarily because of the Super Bowl champions, the defending. We had, the 2022 NCAA basketball champions 45 miles down the road, and soccer is overtaking Kansas City. So hopefully we will get the winter fan base back. I mean, talk about, when you look at TV ratings and you looked at the soccer games and particularly the Chiefs, they were astronomical. I just wished it was a little more hopeful for the Royals, but hope does always spring eternal. And I'm open for questions.
Didn't they just sink a lot of money into the renovation of Kauffman Stadium, and won't that make any kind of new stadium a really hard sell?
That is part of the problem. Actually, it's been a little bit more than 10 years since that's happened. But Sherman is, I don't know if he wants to break away from, because Jackson County actually owns the sports complex. If he wants to break away and build his own stadium, and he wants to build his own ballpark village. The downtown area has had a renaissance over the last decade or so. We finished the T-Mobile Center in 2007. We built a couple of entertainment districts with lots of bars and restaurants. The problem is, in building a downtown stadium, the number one primary location that has gotten a lot of play recently, particularly in the last 2 weeks, has been where our newspaper was. They had their physical plant and their printing plant there. The problem is that it butts up against an interstate highway. Now it might be perfect in St. Louis because that's what Bush is like, but they would have to build the stadium away. And of course, like most downtowns, a dearth of parking, mass transit from the suburbs is a little bit tight. Plus, you'll still, as far as flack, a lot of the flack is going to be that Kansas will not participate in funding for the stadium if public funding is needed. And Missouri and Kansas get in a feud whenever stadiums or arenas or big construction projects happen.
Do you think, Roger, that it was a mistake for the Royals to sink so much money into the renovation of Kauffman 12 years ago or so?
No. But you also got to remember it was different owners.
No, I did pick that up. I mean, I don't know, but Sherman may be wanting simply to make his statement. This is my my team, my stadium, my ego, not the Kaufman Royals, not anybody else's Royals, right?
That's it. It is his team now.
Do you think that the Royals fans could survive the kind of drought they had between the 85 championship and the 15 championship?
They will survive if the Chiefs keep winning the Super Bowls.
That's an important factor.
Plausible,
Huh?
which could happen. I mean, they're stacked.
I mean, to put it into support, the TV, the rating for the Super Bowl was in the 80s. The share of the audience was almost 95. And when the AFC Championship was played, people were waiting to get inside Arrowhead at 4:30 for a 5:30 game. Not 4:30 in the morning, 4:30 the day before. So as long as the Chiefs are winning, they won't worry about the Royals drought.
Yeah, in Detroit, we have a sort of a similar situation, except the Lions aren't any good, albeit this year they did experience some hope. I turned on the game today on the right shoulder station for the Tigers. The pregame starts 25 minutes before first pitch, but they have, of course, sports talk before that. 80% of talk in the hour before the pregame was NFL draft, and a little bit hockey and a little bit of Tigers. I mean, you would think this was football season, not baseball season. The Lions have been so awful, and yet everything they do makes news, no matter what month it is, no matter how bad they are, and no matter how good the Tigers are. It's just amazing.
That sounds like Cleveland too.
Well, we're going to be the same thing because we're going to have the draft. The NFL draft is coming to Kansas City.
And it's coming to Detroit next year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Don't they always have it in April, which is drowning out a lot of baseball?
End of April, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Just drowns out baseball's opening day so much.
Well, it used to be, of course, that the NCAA tournament sort of killed coverage of baseball in March. And now the NFL draft kills it after opening day. From opening day until May, it's NFL draft time.
Right.
So do we have any more comments or questions about the Royals before we just go into open session here until we have about 35 minutes before we'll wrap up.
Yeah.
I like Brady Singer and Bobby Witt Jr.
Yeah. That's what I was going to ask. How good is Bobby Witt? How good can he be?
I think that when Bobby Witt Jr.'s career finishes with the Royals, barring injuries, he'll have his number 7 will be retired like 5, 10, and 20.
Well, the Royals had 4, if I'm not mistaken, they had 4 first-round pitchers picked. That is, they picked, I think, 4 pitchers in the first round recently, and Brady Singer was one of them.
Yeah.
And the only one that's actually done halfway decent.
Yeah, I guess 1 out of 4 is pretty good, though. Part of a rotation, anyway.
Yes.
Well, you can check with the Tigers about the perils of drafting
Oh, yeah.
pitching, really high pitching, and then expecting a smooth development path. That goes back to Dombrowski, of course, was, you know, he wanted to grow the pitchers and buy the bats when the pitchers were ready. Problem is, you can't tell when the pitchers are going to be ready. And even when they are ready, they're on the IL half the time. So, okay.
And Gary, the Royals, you know, I wish the Royals have hardly ever drafted any Kansas City kids. I mean, you know, we passed on Pujols years ago, and we passed on Lang and Wentz of the Tigers.
Well, we'll see how good Lang and Wentz are going to be. Wentz was supposedly headed for Toledo until an injury gave him a slot in the rotation. I think Wentz is going to be good. I think it's always a bad sign, though, when your organization looks for improvement from a guy who was a top prospect for another team 5 years earlier. That tells you, you know, you're living off or trying to make profit from other teams' table scraps. And I do think Wentz has got real potential, and it was a good move the Tigers to get him, but he is essentially table scraps, you know. So, okay. So far, so good. It's 9:21. We have a half hour, a little bit more to just chew the fat. We still have 41 people in the meeting, so let's open it up for discussion of other divisions that are less interesting than the AL Central.
Well, I was going to ask a question that doesn't particularly have to do with predicting the teams. Anybody have any feeling for the new rules and their possible impact on attendance? And here's one of my thoughts. If baseball games get over about a half hour earlier, that sort of expands the zone from which people will, you know, I live an hour away from Chicago. So if a night game gets over at 10:30, I'm not real keen, but if a night game gets over at 9:30, now I'm a fan more often. Anybody have any feeling about how attendance has been the first weekend?
I'm kind of really interested to see how that happens as well, because one of the things that the Guardians do is until Memorial Day and then after Labor Day, like the part of the season that's part of the school year, weekday games start at 6 local time, not 7. So, I mean, I don't know. The Guardians are on the road until Friday, so but it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out.
Yeah, I was on a work trip last week in Seattle. So I saw the Guardians play on Thursday, the opener in Seattle. And so that was we've seen it on TV. It's one thing to see it on TV, but it is weird watching it with the new rules. I'm saying it's like, I think I like it, but you don't see as many people get up. I mean, that's one of the issues, how are concessions going to be hit at all these ballparks because of this? But the other thing is just watching, like, a ball gets fouled off, a batter, right-handed hitter hit one, and he fouled it off backwards, high up in the air. You watch the graceful arc of it fall into like the first few rows behind home plate, first base, that area there. And, so I just watched the flight of the ball. It landed. I looked, there's 8 seconds left on the pitch clock. So you've got situations where the ball hasn't even landed and they're already handing the ball to the catcher to throw to the pitcher to start that pitch clock. It was fun, but it takes an adjustment like that. I know, Vince, you would have seen when Karanchik blew up in the 8th inning. You think about that inning, how it played out last year. That would have taken a half hour to play. Thursday, I think that was over in 10 minutes. That whole sequence was over in less than 10 minutes, including arguing with the umpires, doing this, doing that. It goes so quickly now that, I think it's positive, but I don't know about helping people get to the park. But I know that when they're in the park, I didn't see as much movements out of the seats because people are watching. It's not, it's not, you're not like looking for something to do or something to drink because there's stuff going on.
Maybe it's too cold to move.
Yeah.
My concern is that if you have this situation where you have the rules changing the outcome of the game, like where the pitcher didn't get started in time, so it's another ball, or it's another strike, and we start affecting the game because of the technical violation of the rules. Wait till one team loses a game because there's an extra ball called against a batter, or a walk ensues, or they call an extra strike, and it affects the outcome of the game. I think you're going to have people screaming a little more loudly because there'll be a sense that they lost a game because of this violation of the rule. You already see a little bit of that with the shift rules. Suddenly the left fielder's playing second base. So you're going to see people manipulating, trying to get around the rule. So
I have never been thrilled with the shift rule. I would really love to have some team decide to play with 2 outfielders and 4 or 5 infielders, or 3 infielders and 4 outfielders, depending on the quality of the outfielders or whatever. But the pitch clock doesn't bother me. And what they say is that in the minors, everybody just gets used to it after a month or 2, and it's just the way the game goes. So we're not likely to have a lot of problems after May or so. I guess we have to wait and see.
yeah, but you see one team suddenly lose a game because of that, and you'll have one fan base go berserk. Yeah, I don't like it when they manipulate, like making the bases bigger doesn't bother me because that's pretty much even to everybody. But you see a pitcher that doesn't get the pitch off of in the half second of the 30 seconds or something. That I think you'll start seeing fans go, they'll feel they got cheated somehow, or it's not enforced evenly.
We used to watch Mike Hargrove bat, and his nickname was the human rain delay.
Yep.
Oh, yeah. Well, I know.
Getting rid of that certainly is a good idea.
No, I agree, but
Yeah, they bring it on themselves.
Yeah, but pitchers used to be able to throw at him.
Yeah.
That's how they used to be able to combat all of this, but now you don't see that as much. But what I'm really interested to see is how are they going to quantify how many quote new fans this brings in, because they talk about doing all these things because they want more people to be interested in baseball. Is it really a 3.5 hour game or a 2.5 hour game? I feel like is that time difference really going to be the determining factor on if somebody who may not have been interested in baseball all of a sudden interested in baseball? So I think that's the big gamble here, is because they're pissing off plenty of traditionalists, which they knew they were going to do, but I have no idea how they're going to quantify whether this really brings in new fans or if it's just, how do you quantify what's a new fan? I really think it's going to be an interesting circumstance. Now, maybe this is something they won't be able to really quantify for a whole generation of people because you're dealing with younger people, but I still think you're hedging a lot of bets on whether or not it's going to get more people interested by pissing off the people who are already supremely interested.
I think Major League Baseball is going to be clearly declaring it a success, whether there's more fans or not.
Yeah,
because they've already committed to the change in the first place. So they'll declare it a success no matter what.
Well, because they're going to be judging themselves.
Exactly.
Well, you got TV ratings. That's they're going to still be the same number of commercials because you still got the number of breaks between games. You may actually have more commercials because you're not going to have as many rainouts because the games get over faster. But like TV pays the bills for NBA and it pays the bills for NFL. And I think they're thinking really about TV and not the fans in the park.
Right. Otherwise, they would have the break between innings could be shorter and that not affect the pitch to pitch game. But they're not doing that because that's where all the commercial money is.
But that leads into how people watch the game. And here in the Twin Cities, the past week, there was a report in the Star Tribune about how the Twins have lost, half their viewership, though, because people are cutting cable. And I'm sure that's the case around around the Central Division. Have other cities suffered that because younger people don't watch cable? They will watch baseball through streaming apps, so like the MLB app, though, like the crappy Bally app that we have here in the Twin Cities. So, what are people's opinion from around the division about that? What has your experiences been in different cities?
That's a really good
Bally
point.
sucks in Cleveland too.
Yeah, I think it's noticeably bad. But I think Bruce is right. They're going to declare victory no matter what happens because they're their own judge.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
so,
I think
so far the
one way-
games are about half an hour less. So
Yeah.
Right.
at least those
I think-
statistics I've seen this week.
I think in terms of the game time, it'll be a success if more fans come at the start of the game, don't come late, and particularly fewer fans leave before the game is over, right? So if you have a third of the crowd leaving after the 7th inning, and that is greatly reduced because the game's a half hour shorter, that's a big benefit, right? As far as the measuring new fans, I would think the primary way that would show up is the percentage of fans in the younger demographic, like younger than 30. We won't know that. I mean, we won't for 10 years. You said a generation. I'm thinking 10 years.
They'll
If in
do
10
some,
years,
they'll do some surveys and polls. They'll figure that out.
Yeah.
well, they'll figure it out, but that's not a long-term thing. You could have a blip. I mean, the baseball needs to dramatically reverse the demographic trend, which is the fan base skews older. I know the other sports aren't immune to the same problem, except, I mean, of the football and basketball, but still baseball is the worst of the big four sports. And I think that if you could see that either increase in the younger demographic or a decline in the erosion, that would be an impressive achievement if you could trace it to the change in the game times.
Yeah, especially in the World Series. I mean, why can't they have one day game in the World Series? I mean, the thing that people always talk about with the time is that, younger generations aren't seeing the historical World Series because it lasts too long. Well, it still doesn't start till 8:30. Like it doesn't matter how long the game lasts when it's 8:30 and you're talking about kids. The most they're going to be able to watch is an hour anyway, if your parents are me and I want them to see it. But that's really late on school nights and stuff. I mean, there's no reason they can't have one afternoon game or do other things like that if their real goal is to get young fans. I don't think I mean, young fans now, it's still up to the parents. Young fans aren't going, ooh, the game's shorter. No, they either love baseball or they don't. They're 10. So I still don't know how that's all going to be quantified.
The length of games is one component, but another major component is the change in the shift rules. and I think that MLB is they're counting on the game being more enjoyable for fans of all kinds. They don't want to see the home run, the walk, and the strikeout. They want to see singles and doubles and stolen bases and hit and runs. And I think when you put the infielders on, 2 on each side of second base, I think you're going to see some changes in the way the game is played. And that's what I think that's another thing that MLB is counting on.
But they're counting on teams like MLB wants that, but the teams are still, the way the metrics are steering everybody, it's
not going to happen.
To break away from that walk, strikeout, homer.
Yeah, it's not going to happen overnight. I agree. But I think one thing you're going to see this year is the batting average is going to go up.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know if there probably won't be fewer strikeouts because there are other factors involved in that. Pitchers are obviously throwing a lot harder than they did 20 years ago, right? Everybody's throwing 98, 99, 100. So you're still going to see a lot of strikeouts. You're still going to see a lot of guys launch angle. The launch angle is going to be a big thing still. But, you're going to see some guys hitting to all fields. You're going to see hit and runs. You're going to see a lot more stolen bases. You've already seen more stolen bases than you have.
That's very clear.
Yeah.
I think too, the teams are going to have to start paying for those little things. paying
Yeah.
for the stolen bases,
Yeah.
paying for the batting averages. Right now, it's the home runs and the strikeouts they're paying for.
That's why it won't happen overnight.
Right. That's going to take some time before they start doing that.
And I wouldn't be so cynical about talking about MLB announcing that it's a success. I think you're going to see results right away, and I think people will see that it will have been a success. And I was thinking about this. You're seeing the way they're playing now, pitching, hitting, not stepping off, not stepping out of the batter's box. It's like the game was played in the late 70s, early 80s. And at some point, it'll take a few years. You might not need the pitch clock anymore because we'll be back in that way of playing the game. And that's what they want, I think.
Yeah.
I think that's what a lot of us want.
I mean, like you said, we're going to streaming, so we're kind of getting away from the channel surfing and stuff. But I still can't help think that the people still are channel surfing. You know, just you've increased the odds that if you flip onto a baseball game, you're watching something happen. You're not just watching,
In a not sort of way, that might be the opposite might be true, actually.
I didn't hear that. What was that?
Oh,
What do you mean by the opposite?
Go ahead, Richard.
Also, I was saying is like, if you're flipping channels, that the odds are there's a greater chance that if you stumble on a baseball game, something will be happening. The pitcher will be throwing a pitch, a batter will be swinging, as opposed to the pitcher's off the mound, the batter's out of the box, there's people just standing around. That's been greatly reduced. And it's subtle, but I think that you may get people who are flipping channels who like just, oh, there's something going on. They'll stay with it as opposed to just flipping past it. And that's long-term, but who knows?
I was going to make a mention. If the game is a half hour shorter, but it's still the same amount of commercial breaks, the odds are this is just for TV, if you turn onto the TV to a major league broadcast,
You're more likely
you're actually going to have more of a chance of hitting the commercial thing on the field.
Absolutely.
And that I think has a lot of effect on channel surfing.
Yeah.
Plus, remember, if the game is a half hour or less, that means the TV station has a half hour more broadcast to put something else on and get more TV revenue.
Mm-hmm.
So in that sense, I think the TV economics are delighted by a faster game.
One thing I've noticed in the first 3 days of the season is I can't read during a baseball game. Seriously, yeah. I can't turn away. I can't turn away from the screen. I can do that when I watch football. I can read plenty between plays, but I can't do that, and I can't do that with baseball anymore.
And from the standpoint of the, we're talking about people watching on television, but from the standpoint of the people in the stadium who really like baseball, I think that'll affect concessions as well. And it seems some of the teams may have to alter their method of handling, maybe have more waiters and waitresses walking through the stands taking orders or something, because people may not want to get up and go and spend 10 minutes at the concession stand.
Yep.
And what's really interesting about that, at least in Cleveland, is that they're talking that, a lot of the vendors, they went to cashless at the stands a couple of years ago, but now they're saying that a lot of the vendors are going cashless as well.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one of the things they're also doing are these grab and go stores. I think we're going to see a huge portion of the concession stands.
They got those in Cleveland too.
Yep.
Yeah, you just walk in, grab it, walk out. And the data I've seen from Sports Business Journal are really impressive of how quickly people can go in, grab something, and get out. Obviously, it doesn't work for a hamburger really, but it works for a beer or a soft drink or a popcorn or a hot dog. And it really improves the transition time. And of course, it saves on game day employees, which of course they're going to be interested in doing, is cutting down their payroll.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things the White Sox were promoting this year, that we've added more grab and go places. You know,
Baltimore has a lot of grab and go places, but they don't pay, and that's illegal, but you did a
We're
lot.
talking about at the ballpark.
Huh?
We're talking about just at the ballpark.
Oh,
at
okay.
the ballpark, inside the ballpark.
Yeah, I'm fascinated that, by the way, I was curious tonight is how far we can get into the meeting without talking about the rules changes. We actually got through all 5 team discussions and well into the second hour of the meeting before anyone talked about the rules changes, which is fine. Because I mean, I've heard so much speculation about the rules changes before the season and during spring training that I'm glad to just actually see what happens and not talk about it so much.
So back to Dan's original question about the younger people. I was at Wrigley Field on Thursday, and I was on my way home after a 2-hour and 21-minute game. I was on the platform with the L, and this lady who was with her son came up to me and said, "How'd you like the game?" And I said, "Well, this is the shortest game I've ever seen at Wrigley Field in 20 years. And her son was with her. He was 28. And he looked at me and he said, "This is long overdue." And he was so happy with that game that he went to with his mother. So it was quite an interesting anecdote from Thursday's opening day.
Awesome.
As a longtime White Sox guy, let me tell you that the most enjoyable White Sox games I saw many times were when Mark Burley was on the mound. There was no, I'm going to get the ball, or I'm not going to shake off the catcher. Here it comes. And it's going to be over the plate.
Well,
I went to get once in Wrigley Field, and it was a long game. They had 45 runs that game. 23-22.
Oh, that one.
You can guess which direction the wind was blowing at Wrigley Field that day.
Yeah, you wouldn't care how long that game was. That'd be fun to watch.
I had enough beers in me. I don't particularly remember most of it.
I went to a Cubs game like that once too.
1978.
Didn't go, no.
That. About 40 miles an hour.
Yeah.
Hey, one thing I wanted to address here was Francis Kinlaw asked back there about Tigers ownership. Francis, you're still with us, right?
Yes, yes.
What was your question in particular? I mean, the start of the season, every year there's speculation the Ilitches are going to sell, which I think is just hot air. But did you have some insight or some comment?
No, really, I was just trying to catch up. I guess I'm not, geographically, for those of you who don't know, I'm in North Carolina.
Yeah.
Geographically, I just wondered if there was anything lately on that issue with the Ilitch family.
Nothing, everything I see is speculation about them selling, and it peaks just before opening day. I don't think they have any intention of selling. They're sitting on a gold mine. It's a gold mine when the Tigers are losing. If the Tigers get competitive, it'll be a platinum mine. And I mean, a lot of the speculation is that Chris Ilitch really doesn't care about baseball. I don't think that's true. I do think, though, he's a businessman. His father was a fan and wanted to win. And so he brought in Dave Dombrowski and gave him a checkbook, an unlimited checkbook, and Dombrowski exceeded it. And then we had the Al Avila hangover period. Ilitch won't do that. But I also think there's some indication that the Ilitch organization is sort of trending toward the Wings now. Maybe other people from Detroit would disagree with me. I think there's a little bit of emphasis on the Wings over the Tigers, but it's a business. They're printing $100 bills in the basement at Comerica Park 24/7, and so I don't think the Ilitches are going to sell anytime soon.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, one of the things that we touched on earlier was John Sherman bought a minority stake in the Indians, hoping to become majority owner, and didn't. And then he got a chance to become the majority owner of the Royals. It's hard now to get significant capital invested in your team if you don't give them a path to ownership.
Yeah.
Billionaires want a path to ownership. And so if they're going to buy 20 or 30 or 40% of your team to help you to help you out with a capital shortage. They want to know that in 3 or 5 years, they're going to be in charge if they want to. And it's increasingly hard to turn them down because they're the ones that can finance. They have the money to do that.
And that's actually how we ended up with the Haslams owning the Browns in Cleveland. They were minority owners of the Steelers when they restructured their ownership. And then when, you know, the Browns came available, they bought them. And although I got to tell you, with some of the moves they're making, I still feel like they're sleeper agents for the Steelers.
No, I think most of the Browns' wounds are self-inflicted, though. I don't think they need
the ownership. Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't think they need a sleeper agency in Pittsburgh to do it. They do it themselves.
Question throw out for everybody, maybe. Said that with the shift rules, Yasmani Grandal is probably going to be the one White Sox that benefits the most. Who on the other division teams?
Oh,
sorry.
Well, I had mentioned this early on, but I think that Ramirez is definitely going to benefit from the shift being outlawed in Cleveland. I think he was like the fifth most shifted batter, I should say, in the major leagues last year. And now I think he'll have a little more production.
Yeah, I mean, I think that baseball's problem is that teams are worth so much money that it's hard to change ownership now. And when you do, the owners who buy into the league aren't controllable. Look at Cullen, right? I mean, baseball wants people who spend foolishly to buy a club, because when you overspend to buy a team, not just the sellers benefit, everyone else benefits. Their franchise value goes up. On the other hand, the richer these people are and the more they spend, the less controllable they are. And look at what's going on now with the Mets. And I don't think anyone thinks that he's going to stop spending until they win the World Championship.
That's going to be a lot of money to spend for the Mets.
He's spending it. It's scary how much. I mean, when he makes the Yankees look like pishers, I mean, that's pretty impressive.
Well, the thing about the Yankees too is, I mean, Junior doesn't spend like his old man did. I remember
that's
reading
absolutely right.
at some point a couple of years ago that the Yankees were spending less on payroll than they were in the early aughts, not adjusted dollars, real dollars. Like the number of the Yankees payroll a couple of years ago was less than the number for the Yankees payroll in like the early aughts.
Yeah. Well, that's an analogy like the Tigers, you know, with Chris Ilitch as opposed to his father.
Yeah, but you can spend the most money and still not win a pennant. It's been done.
That's true.
No, absolutely true. On the other hand, if you're the Indians or the Rays or the Royals or the Pirates or the Reds, your chances of winning are a lot less, because you can win, but your chances of winning are a lot less because you don't have that money to spend when you need it.
Mm-hmm. And it's not that they can't spend the money. It's that, you know, those smaller market teams, you can't eat your mistakes like somebody like the Mets or the Yankees or the Dodgers do. The thing that I had always heard is there are 3 ways to build a team: trades, free agency, and drafting and development. And if you want to have a good team, you got to hit on at least 2 of them.
Mm-hmm.
Right. No, I think you're right, Vince, but that's part of being a big spender, is you can eat your mistakes. You sign a free agent for 5 years and $100 million, and 2 years later, he doesn't work out. Well, you trade him to somebody else for a few prospects, you eat 2/3 of his salary, and you go out and buy another free agent to replace him.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, the poorer clubs can't do that. That's just absolutely crucial.
No, they got to hedge their bets and bet big once in a while. And that's a really hard thing to do sometimes, because, I mean, you think about Oakland, like Oakland was in the playoffs every year and they never did that. I mean, obviously they didn't have, you know, the money to do so, but there's there's teams like that where you're waiting to see when the big bet is going to be, and it just doesn't happen. And you're seeing a lot of teams forego that. I mean, the Astros won, and their big bet wasn't going out and getting people. Their big bet was the farm system, and the Cubs did the same thing. But you can't beat Pittsburgh and bet big unless it's a sure thing. You can't take the same kind of gambles.
Although I think like the Mets got hurt really bad. They're still paying Bobby Bonilla. I mean, a big money team can still hurt itself. There's some bets that will
Well,
hurt.
the story behind the story with Bonilla is the Mets said, yeah, we'll give you this deferred deal because we got this guy making money for us. We got this great investment manager, some guy named Madoff.
Yep, that's true. And Madoff made off the money and left the Mets in the win.
Yeah, the ancient Greeks called that hubris.
Yeah, but I'm saying the Mets are still hurting from that. They're still paying Bonilla. The Orioles made a big bet with some right fielder from Cleveland. Actually, I think it came from Chicago, and that hurt them for a long time. They had insurance on them.
Yes.
The Reds are still paying over $1 million a year to Griffey too.
Yeah,
that's what they said. They said he's like the 5th highest paid player on the team. Third
highest. Yeah.
He's gone. But, even a big team can still get hurt. Now they can recover faster, I grant you, but still, I think the Mets are still hurting from Bonilla, just from the massive amount of money they put into him. Because he's still making like what? I think $13 million a year for like the next 15 years.
Well, it goes till the Mets. I don't think it's that. I think relatively it's not that much. He's making a good amount, but it's not. I think it's a blip I think because of inflation and everything. If you actually look at it, you'll see it's not that much relative to the rest of what they pay out.
I just wish I had been an baseball player and got a deal like that.
Yeah,
made my retirement a lot better. But so I think even a big market team like the Mets, the Yankees, they can still burn themselves, and they can just recover faster.
It's funny. You look at the last 4 World Series champions: Houston, Atlanta, the Dodgers, and Washington. There's only one big market team in there.
Yeah, the Dodgers.
Yeah. The other ones is just, it's kind of, you get into the playoffs and then you get hot and you just take it from there. So right, money does not buy pennants.
And the other thing is the Dodgers. You look at their success is as much development and wise trading, and a good farm system as it is, going crazy spending on free agents. They're very circumspect when they get a free agent. It's like, okay, we're going to go get Freddie Freeman or Mookie Betts, guys that are actually worth what they're paying them a lot, but they're actually worth it. They're not getting these disastrous busts like, oh, this guy had a good year, we got to pay him a 10-year deal where we're wondering.
Or
they're paying big for the sure thing.
Or signing long-term contracts, the 8, 9, 10-year ones for guys whose career is slowly on the way down. Right.
Yeah.
One of my impressions is of all the 4 major sports, there's 2 things unique about baseball. Baseball probably does the worst job in trying to make sure that every team is competitive. I think the other 3 sports do a better job at that.
Yeah.
On the other hand, to win in baseball, very rarely does a team win it all in baseball unless of that 25-man roster, 23, 24 are contributing. I mean, in some sports, particularly in basketball, you can have 3 great players on the roster and have a tremendous team. In baseball, you can have 2 or 3 great players and still be pretty damn lousy.
Part of it too is half the teams make the playoffs in those other sports.
Yeah.
Baseball.
They already mathematically have a better chance.
Yeah, but baseball's trying to catch up on that. They're slowly creeping up that way. They got what, 10 out of the 30 now?
Yeah, 10 in quotation marks. Yeah, but yeah, they've got. I mean, if that's what people are wanting and what's going to even them with other sports, that might be the road we're headed.
Yeah. And I checked, Bobby Bonilla gets 1.7 million because his buyout is 1.2, but he's still getting Mets and Orioles salary deferred. He gets about $500,000 for his deferred salary up until about another 5 more years. So he gets Mets buyout money, he gets Mets deferred salary and Oriole deferred salary. So he makes about 1.7 for about the next 5 years.
Yeah.
And then his buyout goes to 2035.
Genius.
Wow.
Yeah, I should have played baseball. So me.
Well, I will say that it'd be interesting if MLB would put in a rule which says you can't have contracts with deferred money, or you can't have contracts where the deferred money lasts longer than 5 years, and force the clubs to pay not up front, but pay as they go. That, because right now what they're doing is they're saying, okay, well, yeah, we're signing this $300 million contract, but we can spread it out over 8 or 10 years. And when you figure in the present value of that money, it's not as great, and we're willing to pay for it. We know in years 8, 9, 10, we're going to be eating, dirt, but at least I think most of them know that. I don't think most of them project those players to be productive in those years.
It still started an interesting trend, though. I mean, like, in a half kidding way, you could make an argument that Bobby Bonilla could be like a good candidate down the road for like the Buck O'Neil Lifetime Achievement Award, because it changed the game. I mean, like, and it really started a trend with salaries.
Yep.
And he wasn't a bad player either.
No, he's a good player, and he's a smart guy to get the contract. But the problem is there are always ways to like the money, because like the Yankees never make any money. They almost operate at a loss. Yeah. It's their TV rights that make all the money. So the Yankees don't have to pay as much money for the salary penalty because they don't make money. Now their TV rights make an enormous amount of money, and that's how the Yankees get away with not paying as much for having too much of a base, because they don't make money. Their TV rights make all the money.
Okay,
This happens owned by the same folks, but
I'm sorry to interrupt here, but it's by my clock 9:56. So I want to thank everybody for participating. We had a peak of 55 people. We still have 32 people on right now. Joe and I debated, and the other chapter leaders, about whether this was too long to do 2 hours. I think we did pretty well. I enjoyed it. I would encourage all of you to let your chapter leader know what you thought of the meeting. Any suggestions you have for future meetings, because we have talked about doing this again, holding the multi-chapter meeting. And I have no announcements for the Detroit chapter, but if any of the other chapter leaders have any announcements they want to make in the last 2 or 3 minutes, please speak up.
Go Twins.
Yeah. I'm working with RJ Lesh on a book on Luke Appling, and today is Luke's birthday. So I just wanted to throw that out there. Happy birthday, Luke Appling.
Yeah. So is he still up and around?
No, he's been dead for a long time, but
I know. But you talk about him in the present tense, so that
What's the timetable on the book, Richard?
Oh God, it's coming along. We're doing research. We're going to Atlanta next month to do some more research, but maybe we'll start shopping it around next year in terms of looking for a publisher and stuff, but we're putting it together. But
awesome.
We just realized that, he's a major Hall of Famer. There's not really a book written about him. And he's
absolutely. I would be really interested to read that one. Very, very cool.
And he's a modern player. He's ahead of his time, and some things that people don't realize, that he just, great player, but oh well.
Awesome.
Is there a video of him hitting that home run in the old timers game?
You better believe it.
I was just going to bring that up. That's my next assignment, is the ballpark biography of RFK Stadium, which is where those Cracker Jack All-Star games were held.
Yeah.
And that's kind of a fascinating story, just because it was a federally constructed stadium, and it was, very underutilized for baseball, and it was beset with all kinds of financial problems in its lifetime.
Okay. All right, 9:59. I agree, Vince. It really was a fascinating stadium. And show of hands here, and then we're out the door. How many people remember the original name for RFK?
Oh,
Bennett Stadium.
DC Stadium.
Yeah.
DC Metropolitan, wasn't it?
DC Metropolitan Stadium.
Yeah, DC Metropolitan, yeah.
Yeah.
Hard, one of those things that's passing by. It would have been great to see the Twins teams of the 60s playing in RFK,
Yeah.
but, all right. Well, anyway, we're out of here, at 10 o'clock. We turn into a pumpkin. Thanks to all. And I'll look forward to hearing feedback, and we'll do this again, I think.
Yeah,
Sounds
sounds
great.
great.
Great discussion, everybody.
Thank you.
Super fun.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Bye-bye.
Take care, and hope to see you in Chicago.
Yep. Bye.
But yeah.